right, class, welcome back to Introduction to Ethics. I hope you're all doing well today. Last time we finished up our look at the 7-step method and how to solve ethical dilemmas using that method. And today we're going to move into our very first topical study for this semester. And from now on, we're going to be looking at different ethical issues. Every week we'll be looking at a different aspect of ethical issues. So in this video today, we're going to be looking at ethics at the beginning of life, part 1. Stay tuned for the PowerPoint. For ethics at the beginning of life, and this is chapter 5, and we are going to be looking at part 1 today. So just some introduction, just to tell you where we're going to be headed in this PowerPoint presentation. First, we're going to be looking obviously at abortion. This is going to be the topic that we're looking at here this week. And so we're looking at abortion. We're going to be looking at the legal background of how abortion came about to be legal in the United States, and then some changes that take place throughout different court cases. And then we're going to be looking at the biblical data, what the Bible says about the beginning of life. And then we're going to be looking at pro-choice arguments for abortion with the pro-life responses to those arguments. And that's what we're going to be looking at in today's PowerPoint. Okay, so the beginning of life, the legal context. And I've put the lettering in red up there so we can kind of follow along with this outline right here. So the legal background or the legal context. And of course, I'm sure you're familiar with what is highlighted in yellow on the screen, the Roe v. Wade court case in 1973, which basically made abortion legal in the United States. Before that court case, it was illegal until the Supreme Court ruled it a violation of the constitutional rights of a woman. So we're going to look just real briefly here at Roe v. Wade. There was a Texas law that forced Norma McCorvey, who was Jane Roe in the Roe v. Wade case, to continue her pregnancy, which the court stated was a violation of the 14th Amendment, which is an amendment that gives people the protections to have the right to privacy. And the court supported her in this court case and basically said that this law did violate her constitutional rights, which extended privacy to the womb. And basically, the government should not be able to tell a woman what she can do in regards to her womb. And it was not just flat out, you could just have an abortion, whenever you wanted. There were some things that were put into place. But as you can see on the screen there, out of this court case, in the first trimester, there was unrestricted abortion. You could just have an abortion in the first trimester of pregnancy. In the second trimester, the court viewed that, well, there is life, there's something going on there with the fetus, and so the court tried to limit it with the second trimester, saying you can only have an abortion in the second trimester for the health of the mother. And the state could actually even regulate that, coming out of Roe v. Wade. Now, there's going to be other cases coming up we're going to look at that do change how the state could or could not regulate the abortion. And then in the third trimester, again, the state could regulate, and it was going to be more of an extreme situation. Again, health of the mother or something like that. It was not abortion on demand. Many people say Roe v. Wade, legalized abortion so that women could just have abortions whenever they wanted, and that's not really the case. In the third trimester, it was heavily regulated, and there was not abortion on demand. But that would kind of change. And in this court case here on the screen, Doe versus Bolton, 1973 again, it was actually the same day as Roe v. Wade was passed. Doe versus Bolton would eventually lead to abortions on demand. Right off the bat, it was not that way, but it would lead to abortions on demand because of the details in this case and how it was passed. Basically, the first trimester, just like Roe v. Wade, there were no restrictions. The woman could have an abortion whenever she wanted in the first trimester. But then the second and third trimester, it was mainly because of the health of the mother. And this is where things got really broad. As you see on the screen, the health the term health was broadened to mean physical health, psychological health, and emotional health. And when they looked at the psychological and emotional health, they also included familial health, which is the family's health that the pregnant mother is in. Would there be some issue that would cause psychological or emotional trauma to the family? And then also the age of the mother was brought in. So there were some restrictions or a look at the age of the mother. But the key term, and this is in quotes because it comes right from the court case, it was in the best clinical judgment, quote unquote clinical judgment, for the doctor and the mother in the clinical judgment, if it was physical, psychological, emotional, or familial situations that would cause some sort of adverse desire. So physical health, psychological health, emotional health. And that can become very broad because it's very subjective then from doctor to doctor, or maybe the mother could speak to the doctor and explain things out. I mean, it could even go to where she was explaining things that might be exaggerated or lying to basically have the doctor agree that there was some sort of health issue, whether that be psychological or emotional, to where it broadened to have abortions almost on demand. And this would last for many years until things started tightening up legally for abortions. And that's where we get to this court case. So 1989, so quite a few years have gone by since abortion had become legal. Webster versus Reproductive Health Services. The court ruled that the state does not need to pay for abortions for women who cannot afford an abortion. So the court said it's not the state's business to pay for it. That's not the role for taxpayers to pay. Although the state, I'm sorry, there's a typo there, the state viewed it a woman's right to have an abortion, the state was under no obligation to pay for it. Okay, so that was a court case that went in the kind of on the side of the pro-life movement. The pro-life would be against the pro-choice. Pro-life is against abortion. So the pro-life would have agreed with this, hey, and used this to try to limit abortions, and the state should not pay for it, and the government agreed the state should not pay for it. Webster versus Reproductive Health Services. The next one is a couple of years later, Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992. And this was the best opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade, but the court did not overturn it. And this was what came out of this court case, the results. There was a mandatory 24-hour waiting period before the abortion took place. So it wasn't the woman walked in to an abortion clinic, said, this is the situation, and then she had an abortion. There was a 24-hour waiting period. And for that 24 hours, the woman would have been informed of the abortion procedure, the risks of the abortion procedure, and the age of the fetus. So she would have 24 hours to think on these things. The parents of minors would need to give consent. So you can see things are kind of being restricted than just abortion on demand. And also, a point that is part of this case, the very last bullet point on the screen, spousal notification was not required. The court did deem that if the spouse had to be notified, then that would put a burden on the woman wanting the abortion. And so the spouse did not need to be notified before the abortion took place. But you can kind of see there, it is kind of getting a little more strict. And many pro-choice advocates, they were very upset with this because they said that informing the woman of the abortion procedure's risk and the age of the fetus during that 24-hour waiting period was an attempt to influence the woman to not have an abortion. So pro-life activists would definitely like this, to try to influence women not to have the abortion. Okay, so that's Planned Parenthood versus Casey, 1992. Gonzalez versus Carhartt, 2007. This court case prohibited partial birth abortions unless the mother's life was in danger. And really, by this time, with partial birth abortion, it gets to the point that there was no need to abort the child, because partial birth abortion means that the baby was halfway already out of the womb. So to save the mother's life, it's a pretty big stretch. And if the abortion took place because of the saving the mother's life, it would have been pretty rare that would have actually happened. But what it did prohibit was a specific procedure. It prohibited the specific procedure called intact D&E, which means dilation and evacuation. The fetus is basically delivered feet first, and as the head remains in the mother, the skull or the brainstem is pierced to immediately kill the fetus. And again, this is what you consider partial birth abortion. And for this to happen, again, it would have been to save the mother's life. It would have been pretty rare that this needed to happen to save the mother's life. As I said, the fetus is almost delivered. It did not prohibit all third trimester abortions. There were still third trimester abortions that took place to save the mother's life, but it did prohibit the procedure of intact D&E. Okay, so those were the court cases for legalization of abortion and the different changes that took place through the courts. But now we're going to move to the Bible and the beginning of life. What does the Bible say about life and about abortion? Well, the Bible never says thou shalt not have an abortion. Okay, it doesn't say that. It says thou shalt not kill, but some people, especially pro-choice advocates, they say you're not even killing anything. They'll call it a lump of cells or just tissue or something like that. But the Bible never says thou shalt not have an abortion. Nevertheless, abortion is sin. Based on the biblical principles and what we find in the Bible, it would be clear that abortion is sin. God attributes the same characteristics to the unborn in the womb as to a person outside of the womb, indicating that the unborn is a person. Now, there are numerous passages that speak to the continuity of personal identity from conception to adulthood. It's in the Bible. The Bible uses the concept of birth and conception interchangeably. So it doesn't mean you have to be born to become a person. It's just you just have to be conceived. Conception and birth are used interchangeably. And it's implying that at conception, okay, so when the egg is fertilized, at conception, a fetus is a person. And so we're going to go to the Bible. Job 3:3. Let the day perish in which I was to be born, and the night which said, a boy is conceived. And that's from the NASB version of the Bible, translation of the Bible. This passage employs synonymous parallelism, indicating that the child who was born was the same person as the boy that was conceived. So you can see that birth and conception are used interchangeably here. It's the same person. The Hebrew term for boy is also used elsewhere in the Old Testament to refer to a man. Okay, so now you have it as the one that is born is a boy that is conceived, and then it's the same word for man. So it's just proving the personhood or the personal identity of that conception. See Exodus 10:11 and Deuteronomy 22:5. You can look those up later if you want, but there's just two more verses in regards to the man, the terminology for the man. Personal identity of children outside the womb can be traced back to the child in the womb. That's kind of the point there of Job 3. Okay, let's look at Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Okay, so this indicates that the prophet Jeremiah was considered by God to be a person prior to his birth. Okay, so while he was in the womb, he was a person. God knew Jeremiah in the womb in the same way as he does a child or an adult outside of the womb. Okay, so again, this is proving and pointing to biblically that the fetus that is in the womb is an actual baby and is an actual person, in this case being Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah. Okay, so let's look here at the birth narrative of Christ, because we see it here also. Luke applies the same Greek word for baby for John the Baptist in his mother's womb. And that's in Luke 1:41 to 44. We'll get that in a second. And to Jesus as a newborn, Luke 2:16. So let's look at these passages. Luke 1:41 to 44. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. So that's speaking about John the Baptist in the womb of Elizabeth, and it's called a baby. And the baby, John the Baptist, leaped in her womb. Verse 42. And she cried out with a loud voice and said, "Blessed are you among women," speaking to Mary, "and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And how has it happened to me that the mother of my Lord would come to me? For behold, when the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby," again inside the womb, "the baby leaped in my womb for joy." Okay, so that's John the Baptist leaping for joy. Now, baby here in the Greek is brephos, and it's describing John the Baptist in the womb. Now we look at Luke 2:16. So they came in a hurry and found their way to Mary and Joseph and the baby as he lay in the manger. Now that's speaking of baby Jesus, and baby Jesus is in a manger. It's the same word, baby, which is Greek brephos, and this is describing Jesus outside the womb and in the manger. So you see that there's no difference in the Bible from the baby in the womb compared to outside of the womb. So if the baby outside of the womb is a person and is a human and is alive, then the baby inside the womb is a person, is a baby, is alive. But of course, many people do not hold to the biblical truth that we just read. And they have pro-choice arguments. So these are the people, pro-choice advocates. They are arguing that abortion should be legal, various degrees, all the way to abortion on demand. Now, the issue that we're going to look at here in regards to the arguments, you're going to see a common statement, and it's basically assuming that the fetus is not a person. And what it is, it's a logical fallacy based on, as you see it on the screen there, the quote-unquote begging the question. Begging the question means that the advocate for something, the pro-choice advocate in this case, they must prove something. It begs the question. They must prove it for it to be true. And the issue is that they cannot prove it. Pro-choice advocates must assume, which begs the question, that the fetus is not a person. But that is what needs to be proven for the pro-choice advocate. Okay, it begs the question. So what they do is they assume that the fetus is not a person. But that's the crux of the issue. They need to prove that. They need to prove to answer that question, and they cannot. The question is this: is the fetus a person or not? How one answers that question will determine whether the pro-choice argument is sound. Now, we're going to look through 7 pro-choice arguments, and we're going to see the pro-life response, or the pro-life pointing out the problem with their argument. Okay, so pro-choice argument number 1. A woman has the right to do with her own body whatever she chooses. And you'll hear that a lot. And the response is this: well, that's false. So let's look at just the situation or the example with drugs. Okay, it is not an absolute right to take whatever drugs you want. There's different levels of drugs. You can go into the drugstore and you can buy over-the-counter drugs that is just like aspirin or whatever it is, and you can just go buy it. But then there's other drugs that are going to be prescribed by a doctor. And so you don't just go in and just take whatever drugs you want. And then you can talk about illegal drugs, which are illegal, obviously, against the law. So you don't have an absolute right to take whatever drugs you want. So you can't just say, well, it's the right. The woman has the right to do with her own body whatever she chooses. What if that woman wanted to have the right to, to use meth or to smoke crack cocaine? Well, those are illegal drugs, and she doesn't have the absolute right to do that. So it's the same kind of concept. It's false. That right is not absolute. Second is, it says that a woman has the right to do with her own body whatever she chooses. Well, the fetus is not part of her body. The fetus is in her body, but it's not part of her body. It's only connected through the umbilical cord. And everything else is separate from her, even what the child is growing in the womb. But just some details there. The DNA. Every single person has genetically distinct DNA. It is not her DNA that is in the fetus. It's her and the father's DNA that have been brought together in the fetus. So the DNA is genetically distinct, and everybody's is genetically distinct. And also the fetus has its own heart, its own circulatory system. It's separate from hers. So you can see that there's separation there. Also, gender, just the flat out gender of the child can prove the point that the fetus is not part of her body, because males obviously are distinct from the female mother. So you wouldn't say, well, the male is part of her body. No, the male is in her body as the fetus. Because it is attached by the umbilical cord does not entail that it does not have its own identity. No, that fetus has its own identity as a fetus inside the woman. So if it is a person, the woman cannot murder it. Again, it begs the question. The pro-choice advocate must prove that the fetus is not a person. And this argument does not prove that. It just begs the question. You need to prove that if you're a pro-choice person. Pro-choice argument number 2. If abortions are illegal, we will return to back alley abortions. Response. Again, begs the question. Okay, so it assumes the fetus is not a person. Otherwise, killing the innocent is allowable as a societal responsibility. Okay, if it's not a person, okay, you definitely would not want to go to back alley abortion clinics again. So it's assuming that the fetus is not a person, and then what you're doing is you're opening Pandora's box. Then you can have all kinds of reasons to kill innocents, and even to the point of being a societal responsibility. But also, this is exaggerating the danger to women. So a pro-choice argument is like, if it becomes illegal, then all these women are going to be going to back alley abortions and abortion clinics and all of that. And really, it's an exaggeration. The statistics of women who actually died through back alley abortions was greatly exaggerated and would have been sensationalized to kind of prove their point that back alley abortions are deadly to all the women going there, when statistically very few died in back alley abortions. Pro-choice argument number 3. Unwanted pregnancies will produce a financial hardship. Okay, again, you're going to see this time and time again. It assumes the fetus is not a person. Otherwise, killing the innocent, if they are a source of financial hardship, is allowable. Okay, and you just ask the question, where can that lead to? Again, if the point is financial hardship, then you can, kill the innocent if they can't prove that it's a person. So we would say it's a person. You're killing the innocent person because of a financial hardship. Well, what about father loses his job and the family is under financial strain and there's a baby in the family? Well, that's a financial hardship, so let's just get rid of the baby. It could just lead to different things, and we don't even have to talk about abortion. What about the drain on the family finances for the elderly mother who is being treated medically to care for her late in life? Well, why not just bring in euthanasia and just eliminate grandma? And that way, she's not a financial drain on the family. So it just can open up all kinds of issues with this. It confuses, this is important where you see it highlighted in blue there, It confuses finding a solution with eliminating a hardship. Here's an example. The solution to unwanted pregnancies is not to eliminate the pregnancy. Because if you want to be consistent in that, that means the solution for poverty would be to exterminate the poor. Okay, so it's the same kind of thought process. So you don't find a solution, okay, by eliminating the hardship. Pro-choice argument number 4. Society should not force women to bring unwanted children into the world. Here's the response. Again, the pro-choice advocate is assuming the fetus is not a person. Here's the issue. You cannot determine the worth of a person based on how much they are desired. If they're not desired, that doesn't mean they're not a person. Okay, so that's the person with the less desire. That's their problem. It doesn't take the personhood away from the unwanted person. In this case, the unwanted child. If the fetus is a person, it has the right to live regardless of whether or not it is wanted. There is always the option of putting the child up for adoption. Okay, pro-choice argument number 5. A woman should not be forced to bring handicapped children into the world. Response, again, begs the question. It's assuming the fetus is not a person. The pro-choice advocate assumes it's not a person. If handicapped children are persons, which they are persons, they have a right to life. Okay, if they're persons, that doesn't matter if they're handicapped or not, they have a right to life. Such abortions are very small in number. Again, that's another thing. The pro-choice advocate, they really amp this up. And they're saying, like, all these handicapped children are being born, and they should have the option to be aborted. The woman should be able to abort them. All of that. Well, really, statistically, these kinds of abortions are actually quite small in number. Even if successful, this argument would only justify a very small percentage of abortions. And again, it's not abortion on demand. Okay, so we don't have abortion on demand. And this handicap children in the world, bringing handicapped children in the world, is a small percentage of abortions. Pro-choice argument number 6. Society should not force women who are pregnant from rape or incest to continue their pregnancies. Again, it begs the question, and the pro-choice advocate is assuming the fetus is not a person. The conditions under which a person is conceived, okay, right there in the center, underlined. The conditions under which a person is conceived do not have a bearing on personhood. Just because they're conceived in this way does not take away who they are as a person. Again, such abortions are small in number. Okay, it's very small. It's usually blown out of proportion by pro-choice advocates to try to make their point. Look at the statistic there. 1 out of 100,000 cases of rape result in a pregnancy. And in that case, some women who become pregnant through rape, they actually have the baby. Okay, some women do. So it doesn't even mean that if you're pregnant from rape, they all get aborted. Okay, so 1 out of 100,000 cases of rape result in a pregnancy. Okay, so it's very small in number when this happens. But pro-choice advocates, they blow it up out of proportion. And our last one, pro-choice argument number 7. Restrictive abortion laws discriminate against the poor. Again, pro-choice advocates assume the fetus is not a person. It begs the question, so they need to answer that, and they can't. So, otherwise, the state has a responsibility to make the taking of innocent life an equal opportunity venture. Okay, if it's based on the discrimination against the poor, well, now we got to talk about equal opportunity. But here's the point. There is always the possibility of giving up the child for adoption. And there are many homes in the United States that have difficulty having children. They want to have children. They're having difficulty doing it, and their option is adoption. And so there are many homes that would adopt children. So you just can't use this idea of, well, it discriminates against people, so we should have abortions. But again, it begs the question: if the fetus is human or not, or is a person or not, and it's assuming that the fetus is not a person. That's what the pro-choice advocate is doing. It's just an assumption. They have never proven it. Why? Because the fetus is a person. And that is it for now. For the Ethics at the Beginning of Life Part 1. We're going to continue this look in Part 1 in the next lecture, because this PowerPoint was actually very, very long, and so I split it into 2. And so that's it for this half. We're going to cover next half. We're going to cover the next half next time. Okay, class, that's it for today. Next time, we're going to continue our look at the Ethics at the Beginning of Life Part 1, but it's going to be a second video lecture on that topic. I'll see you then.